Aloha, everyone. Welcome to a What's the Scoops podcast. I'm Kuhiro Lewis. And every once in a while, we have a chance to host some amazing guests that are doing great things in the community, but also have experience, expertise on certain matters. So I'm very privileged today to have two of our community leaders. One happens to be a councilwoman, Esther Kiaʻāina, representing the windward side of Oahu, and another leading expert in our community, Halealoha, Ayau, who's here as well to share. Hot topic that's been going on, a lot of conversation is about this Department of Interior consultation session. And so I thought we'd host these two leaders to talk story, maybe educate the community on what this is all about, what opportunities might exist within it, but more importantly, what it means for us as a collective Lahui. So let's start off by Esther. Tell us about yourself a little. I'm sure people want to know. They see you on TV and whatnot. Tell us about your background.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us on today. I'm excited to talk about the DOI consultation process that has just been announced by the Department of the Interior. And as many of you know, I've been in Washington, D.C. for a long time, over 24 years. And I'm glad to be back at the City Council and doing a lot of things at the local level. I have extensive experience, as you know, in the U.S. Congress, having worked for Senator Inouye as an intern, Senator Akaka, Congressman Ed Case, and the Congressman from Guam, Robert Underwood, and of course, under the Obama administration, I was honored to serve as the Assistant Secretary for Insular Areas, overseeing our U.S. territories in the Caribbean and the Pacific under President Obama. Mm-hmm. And so it's been kind of nice to be able to be back here and to just enjoy what everyone has been enjoying while I was in cold D.C. Oh. And yes, it was. And then also, I like the fact that the City Council offers me an opportunity to deal with quality of life issues for not just my constituents on the windward side, but all of Oahu. And as you know, we rolled out an agricultural grants program. I'm very proud of it. In December, they'll be making an announcement for 60 recipients, up to $50,000, and we're going to be rolling out the next phase, which will either be $100,000 or $200,000. Yeah. And this will be a 3-year program. It's good not only to help our farmers, but also food security as well as economic diversification. And I've told my colleagues that when you think about agriculture or other issues, it's not the kuleana of the state and federal governments, it's also the kuleana of the city and county to advance economic diversification. And so I'm having good fun at the City Council.
You're the vice chair, right?
That's correct. And chair of the Housing and the Economy and vice chair of Zoning and Planning.
Wow, okay. Super important positions. Thank you for being here. Excited. I've known Esther for years, so I consider her one of my mentors. So all the things that might go wrong in my leadership, it's because of Esther. I'm kidding. Hale, thank you for being here with us. Very honored to have a sit down, talk story, conversation. You've been instrumental on a number of fronts, especially with our Iwi Kupuna. But can you share with our listeners, our viewers, a little bit about yourself?
Again, mahalo for having me. I was chomping at the bit to get included when I saw Esther was going to be on. I grew up in Halealoha, Molokai. I went to Kamehameha schools. I went to the University of Redlands. I went to the University of Colorado. I got my law degree. I was honored to have been part of the staff of Senator Daniel Inouye, both on his personal staff as well as the Indian Affairs Committee. I got to work on repatriation legislation and other issues that mattered to Hawaiians. I remember him telling me one day that he would be honored to help me with my political career, and I said, problem is your country isn't recognizing my country's legitimacy. When that happens, I'll run for office. And he laughed and he says, you remind me of me, full of idealism when I first got involved. And I always remember that conversation. Since then, that's 30-something years ago, we focused on restoring the ancestral foundation for our people.
Well, mahalo both of you for your work. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Let's just jump right into it. So the Department of Interior recently announced that they're going to be doing, or they want to do consultation with the Native Hawaiian community, similar to how they do so with other recognized tribes on the continent. And I think our community is at a point where they don't even know what that looks like, or what that might mean. So let's start off. Esther, can you tell us, what does this consultation represent? What does it mean potentially?
Well, let me just say that I got the announcement like everyone else, and I was a little shocked. And the reason being that consultations of this magnitude only occur after a government-to-government relationship has been conferred upon either an American Indian tribe or Alaska Natives. And so we don't have that yet. And so for the Secretary of the Interior to be taking this step, which I credit her as the first Native American secretary, is big. It's also a reflection, I believe, of how our relationship, the Native Hawaiian federal relationship, has evolved over the last 30 years, and the good work that has been done by the Hawaii Congressional Delegation in concert with Hawaiian leaders. And that started with the 1993 Apology Resolution, the 1995 Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act, and I'm glad to see that both framed on your wall here, as well as the 2000 Reconciliation Report by the U.S. Departments of Justice and Interior, and of course the 2016 Rules on Self-Governance under President Obama. As a reminder, people only look at what we have today and forget what we didn't have. As recently as the 1980s, we had the U.S. government under the 1983 Native Hawaiian Study Commission Majority Report conclude that the U.S. was not liable for the loss of sovereignty or land of the Native Hawaiian people. And you had the Interior Department disavow itself of a trust relationship under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Both of these conclusions have been reversed. So for us to be at in a position where the Secretary is saying, let's start strengthening the relationship, I mean, how cool is that? And I know we'll probably have more dialogue on the details, but for now, I think it's very important. And the reason it's important is that the relationship has been primarily based on the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which is over a century-year-old, right? All of the other federal acts that exist, many of them are the Department of Education or the Department of Health and Human Services. And so Halealoha will talk about a lot of the federal acts that the department has kuleana. But what this tells me is that putting that all aside, how about we just talk story? And that's where I believe this is significant, because now we can go beyond all of the other processes in place, including the 2016 process that was put in place, and talk about the bigger picture. And this all relates to me from the overthrow.
Right. There's a couple of things. So in short, this is an amazing opportunity.
Absolutely.
Okay. And the secretary is Deb Holland.
That's correct.
Native American. Right. Okay. Hale, your perspective.
So I'm glad you mentioned overthrow at the very end of the comments, because for me, that's the starting point. It's not what the United States has been doing since it's been occupying our country. It's what it's going to do to restore recognition of our sovereignty. And the recognition that while the United States continues to occupy Hawaii, that we try to figure out what is the best way to protect our resources, to be responsible to Hawaii, to our kupuna, to our natural resources. I mean, who's facing probably the most horrific challenge to its resources with the removal of fuel over the central aquifer. I mean, how is that not an act of bioterrorism to make that happen? So to me, our role as Hawaiians is to be able to survive the occupation, and then to be able to, if the United States wants to be wants to consult us, then they must do so in a meaningful way, and have the courage to
Right.
tell the truth.
Absolutely.
If you're the home of the brave, then have the courage to tell the truth, which was contained in the reports done in 1893 following the unlawful overthrow of our country.
If you're the home of the brave, have the courage. I like that. Okay, let's jump into opportunities that could potentially come from this consultation. Esther, so, naturally there's this mechanism that tribes have where they can talk to the federal government. And to your earlier point, we don't necessarily have the same infrastructure as tribes. But in light of the Secretary of the Department of Interior recognizing we don't have that same relationship codified, what opportunities might come by way of this consultation, even without that structure?
Without that structure, again, we won't be narrowly confined to current processes. Again, under the Department of Interior, they do have kuleana. So they consult with Native Hawaiians under the National Environmental Policy Act, the National Historic Preservation Act, and the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which Halealoha helped to author. And of course, they consult with the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And the Department of Office of Native Hawaiian Relations also maintains a list for Native Hawaiian organizations, as well as Hawaiian Homeland Beneficiary Associations. So what I believe this does, for example, a hot topic right now is the Department of Hawaiian Homelands considering giving a longer-term lease to the Prince Kuhio Shopping Center in Hilo. And let me tell you why this is important. The Department of Interior recently, the Solicitor's Office, wrote and actually shared concerns that if they were to move forward with this, which they oppose, it would be a breach of trust on behalf of the beneficiaries. To my knowledge, this is the first time in history that the Department of Interior has ever intervened on behalf of Native Hawaiians outside of a courtroom. Okay, so it's quite significant. So what this tells me is that we, as Hawaiians, we need to embrace that, but also educate the department. And what do I mean by that? Why are we limiting it to the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act? Act 236, which was passed by the state, actually the impetus was to encumber DLNR commercial leases, Department of Land and Natural Resources. And I think that's wrong, and that state law should be abolished. Why can't the Department of Interior extend its mana'o that it did for the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act to the 5F provisions or public lands trust under the State Admissions Act? Native Hawaiians are beneficiaries of that trust. So for me, if they were to extend their oversight, which they could, then they would also consider it a breach of the State Admissions Act, and not just Native Hawaiians, but all of the people of Hawaii, because you're encumbering lands that all of us should have a say in, not automatically extend it. So that just that gives you an example of what I think should be talked about. Again, it's beyond the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, and we can talk about the Public Lands Trust and how we probably need a Inspector General's report from the Department of Interior to look into the manner of how DHHL has administered its leasing program, especially the commercial leasing program. And of course, why not? I think they need to look at the Department of Land and Natural Resources, because Native Hawaiians are beneficiaries of that trust.
Awesome. Okay, getting thinking stimulated. Hala, you want to add to that? The question was, we don't have the same structure per se as other tribes, or same status, being not recognized federally, but we kind of are. But tell us your perspective. What could come out of this consultation session with the Interior?
Well, let me address the front end of the question, though. We have a higher standing than tribes, right? We're not nation within a nation. We're a separate nation. We're equal to the United States. But the United States refuses to accept that, and they have more weapons than we do, so their view takes precedent over ours. So while I recognize that this is important, I think what's more important is that we not lose perspective of the bigger picture. That our kingdom and the United States had 5 treaties at the time of the overthrow. The United States violated all 5 of them
Mm-hmm.
by unlawfully taking our country and now refusing to leave. So, under the laws of under international law, this is considered an unlawful occupation, and so we have to recognize that for what it is. But at the same time, I would agree with Esther: make the most of this situation while being mindful not to sacrifice any of our inherent sovereignty. And so, yes, we're not the same as an Indian tribe, but we have a higher level of standing in my view. I also believe that because a lot of folks have spoken out recently, publicly, when I say folks, I mean Native Hawaiians, opposing involvement in consultation. I'm of the view that what we inherited as Hawaiians at birth is the responsibilities that our kupuna had when they were born that just kept being passed on by generation. And so it behooves us to avail ourselves of all possible tools necessary to be responsible to that kuleana. In the work that I do, I don't have the luxury of saying, I hate the Department of Interior, I'm not going to get involved, I'm going to stick my head in the sand. I don't have that luxury. If a burial site on federal lands gets destroyed because we didn't get involved and block and make sure they didn't come near it, that's not on the feds, that's on us. And so to me, the perspective that should be taken when deciding whether to engage in consultation is not so much your rights and entitlements, but what is your kuleana? What is your responsibility to, again, our natural resources, which is then our akua, our kini akua, our very heritage. Mm-hmm. So I agree. We have to engage. We have to make sure that the feds limit the damage they cause while they're here. Kaho'olawe. It's really nice that they cleaned up part of the mess, but not so cool that they didn't clean it all up. Waihole waikane. Mo'omomi on Molokai, Kalai Okailio. Mo'omomi, by the way, is a burial site. It was used as a target practice during World War II. They didn't clean it up. There's unexploded ordinances there. The current threat we face with the fuel tanks over the Central Aquifer, there's these countless examples of the impacts of federal presence. And if we don't speak up about it, that's on us. And again, I'm not coming from the perspective of rights and entitlements. I'm coming from the perspective of responsibility of kuleana. Until such time, as our queen said, as our sovereignty is restored.
Mm-hmm. Great, Mana'o. Let's jump a little bit into it, because the goal of this, I think, is to inform our community about what this policy is, what opportunities exist. So I want to ask about the structure of it. I believe that we'd be entitled to 2 consultation sessions annually amongst the DOI and the Hawaiian community. But how would that work? How do you see that working?
I think it's for us to help to shape. So let me differentiate between, there's 2 things going on here. The meetings that are going to be happening later this week and in December are based on proposed language for an internal document to the Department of Interior. It's actually for their manual. I highly recommend everyone look at it, because I took a look at it last night for the first time.
Put you to sleep?
Almost. It is overly bureaucratic. I do have concerns, and I intend on putting together a more formal document, because comments are due in December. That is completely separate, that process, which is going to be conducted by the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations, is completely separate from the external consultation process between the Secretary of the Interior and the Native Hawaiian people. However, and that is the process that I'm excited about, because that will help us in reshaping our relationship and having a say. For those of you who are not pleased with the mechanism in 2016, this is your opportunity for mana'o, right? And so I I'm excited about that. Now, going, however, to the manual, I do not dismiss it, because if you look at it, again, it's overly bureaucratic. However, it is a necessary step in moving forward, because although I would like to see increased capacity for the office itself and perhaps them being a little bit more robust, the rest of the department knows nothing about us. And so this gives them an opportunity to do that, to strengthen the relationship with all of the other agencies as well. And even if I believe that that's something they're supposed to be doing already, I believe that this would help. So we need to be careful about looking at the language, because if we don't, then that's what's going to be shaping the manner of how they implement this process. So I have greater confidence with the consultation itself than with this process. So let me just tell you what I'm talking about. For example, I'm worried that that with this proposed language, there's going to be potential paralysis of action, right? We don't need a consultation process for the DOI to take action. So what I'm concerned about is this office says, no, we got to do this, and we got to check off this box and make sure we hear from everybody. So I'm concerned about that if it's not done right. I'm concerned that the definition of trust lands is limited to the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. Again, I'm a firm believer that it should include our public lands trust. There seems to be an overemphasis on Native Hawaiian organizations as consultation, not individuals. Under their definition, I wouldn't qualify to consult with, right? So I think there needs to be a delineation for individual experts, cultural practitioners, kupuna, and others in the community who are leaders. Halealoha happens to be connected to organizations, right, for iwi kupuna. So I have my Prince Kuhio Hawaiian Civic Club, but if I wanted to share my mano'o, which I'm doing now, I'm doing it in my individual capacity, and I would have no avenue to do that. I also think, again, my concern is that they don't use this process as a way not to get things done. And lastly, under the authorities, they talk about the Admissions Act, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act, and not once do they ever mention the apology resolution. And so let me quote here what it says at the end. It says that the Congress urges the President of the United States to also acknowledge the ramifications of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii and to support reconciliation efforts between the United States and Native Hawaiian people. That is the core of what this reconciliation process, this consultation process is, not just the other acts. The other acts is confining. Ramifications, which was actually discussed on the U.S. Senate floor, of a reason why Senator Gorton from Washington State opposed the resolution, clearly means loss of sovereignty of land. The Congress didn't just apologize for the overthrow. And the thought was that, so you apologize and then what? Wash your hands clean. It apologizes so that the U.S. acknowledges the ramifications. So anyway, that's why it's so. That's why it's important for us to focus on the text. Don't just say I'm not interested. I'm only going to wait for the big kahuna, the Secretary of the Interior, and I'm going to focus then. You got to focus now.
So I'm trying to clarify for the average person that's trying to figure out, okay, how do I engage in this? This might be a vehicle to have my voice heard or concerns heard. What are the parameters that you would say the scope of purview that this could present for the average person? You know what I mean?
With regard to the consultations? You have to ask yourself what you want, right? So in my view, what do you care about? And you have to figure out what do you want from the secretary, right? So if you want, say if you want increased oversight on a certain issue, then say why. For example, if you're not pleased with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands on certain issues, then you just say, you have kuleana to help, therefore why don't you step in, right? Why are they not perhaps working more closely with the Department of Housing and Urban Development? Because the Interior Department doesn't have kuleana for money infrastructure funding.
Right.
How are we going to avail ourselves of the big infrastructure bill that just passed, right? So that we can have infrastructure with the 600 million that the state provided, so that we can leverage those things like that.
Okay, so just to be clear, because everybody's coming from different educational backgrounds on the issue, the Interior Secretary's purview though would you say is limited to federal or no? Meaning, like, could it be Office of Foreign Affairs issues, or could it be state issues?
Well, that's a good question. So as far as I'm concerned, it's relationship. It's related to her relationship with the Native Hawaiian people, which should not be limited to the federal government.
Okay.
And why? It's because in the implementation of the various trusts, which the federal government delegated to the state of Hawaii with the Public Land Trust or the Hawaiian Homes Commission versus the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act under the State Admissions Act, they delegated those authorities. They have the right to sue the state of Hawaii for any breach of trust on behalf of Native Hawaiians. So my point is, anything related to the overthrow, they are responsible. In 1993, a lot of people say, well, they apologize and so what? What happened is it mitigated, again, the 1983 Native Hawaiian Study Commission report, which concluded that the U.S. was not liable for the loss of sovereignty. In 1993, the federal government has acknowledged complicity. So they don't know how to shape that relationship. That's our kuleana.
Okay.
And again, what I think is good about the Department of Interior being a vehicle, one of her kuleana is also self-determination for the U.S. territories who are on the list of non-self-governing territories at the United Nations. That would be the Virgin Islands, Guam, and American Samoa. Now, why is that important? Because under the U.S. Constitution and under international law, these areas have a right to continue a relationship with the United States. They can be freely associated with the United States, like Micronesia, or they get full independence. And so, in my mind, the kuleana of the secretary, there are two roles that they have for self-determination: one with Native peoples, and one with regard to the residents who live in certain geographical areas. And Hawaii, after statehood, was unilaterally taken off the list of non-self-governing territories by the U.S. State Department, right? And where were our allies to protest that? They weren't. And similar to French Polynesia, who got relisted on this list, it is not inconceivable for Hawaii to be relisted. Of course, that is a different dialogue, right? But it is a dialogue worth having because, again, people may say, well, I don't want to be part of this nation within a nation dialogue. Well, I don't think it's one or the other. Both processes can actually be explored.
Okay, great. So your perspective is we should be able to address whatever we want to with the Interior Secretary as it relates to Native Hawaiians and the overthrow.
That is my belief.
Okay. Hale, you want to add on to that?
Sure. I think for me, the problem, and again, speaking for myself, I think the problem is that the federal government thinks that they are being responsible to us by promoting the ability for Native Hawaiians to be heard. That is not the issue that matters. The issue that matters the most is the failure of the United States to listen to what is being said by Hawaiians throughout the Kiaʻāina. I mean, ask Roxy what she thinks about federal consultation. If what we say is simply intended to check a box, then it renders the process and its importance meaningless. The federal consultation process can be productive, but only when it is meaningful, which is to say, only when they listen. On our side of the aisle, this is to me more important, that means don't talk out of your ass. Your oina'o is cute, but your ike is required. Well, this is nice. Oh, I have a thought. I want to consult. If you've never engaged in it, you're not an expert in it. I'm sorry, but STFU. I only say it because of this. 33 years of federal consultation. I've sat in meetings with people doing just that, talking out of their ass. And while I'm sitting in that 3-hour consultation, I'm not with my children. So yeah, this is personal to me. Come armed with ike, or follow those who do. You know, the thing that really messes up cultural responsibility is this thing called democracy. Because they made everybody the same. That ain't our way. That's why we had kahuna. That's why we had chiefs. We come from that background. And it's not just simply a matter of power. With that power, like Peter Parker said, comes responsibility. That was the standard. That's what they were held to. And if you was from Ka'u and you was a chief and you were not responsible to your people, you got taken out. That was a penalty. Ike is what we should be. So I'm, the saying, right? Makahana ka ike, makaike ka maupopo. Right? Knowing by doing is the clearest path to understanding. So please don't just make stuff up because you're trying to increase how many likes you get on Facebook, or you're trying to protect a cave that's not in danger. Like, people get plenty of kupuna who need help. Trust me. Go Maui, protect the kupuna at Maui Lani. Help encourage the Mokapu families to rebury those kupuna. Get plenty kupuna that need help. But Wailupe is not one of them. I say you're not helping. Help where help is needed is my point. Train from those who are experienced and knowledgeable. And as Kalihua Krug always urges me and others to do, use Hawaiian language in your everyday life. We have the intellect to do better than the position we're in. But it requires what Auntie Edith Kanakaole said was sorely missing from our community, and that is discipline. Discipline of thought, discipline of action. And so if you're going to engage in the consultation process, do so from a position of understanding. So in our training, in the skill sets of Malama Iwi Kupuna, we always teach our students that we intend to arm you with ike, with knowledge. Because from that knowledge flows courage, flows confidence, no confusion, restores your relationship with your kupuna, and you understand what our role is in this great kuleana we call Hawaii. But just to get involved because, oh wait, I think or I believe, as soon as I hear that, I just tune out. I just think about my kids or lacrosse or something else. So I don't care. But if someone says, think about it. Our ancestors navigated the largest ocean in the world. Do you think at any point the navigator says, hey, by a show of hands, do you think we should go that way or that way? That never happens. Because we believe so much in knowledge that we place our faith in those who awamo that kuleana. And so I'm commenting on our side of the aisle in the consultation process, that when you engage and make sure that it is meaningful. The feds might not treat it as meaningful, but we do. To make sure that we are living up to our responsibilities so that generations from now, when our descendants look back at this, they don't say, what the F was Halealoha doing? That it will be clear by the actions we take in, by the words we share, that we are carrying our responsibility until the United States musters the courage to acknowledge their role in the unlawful overthrow of our country and restores our sovereignty. Restores the recognition of our sovereignty, because our sovereignty never went away.
I want to give you guys a chance to be more free in sharing, but I want to ask this because I'm trying to think about what our audience is going to want as takeaways as we move forward in this consultation process. So Esther, I'm wondering, like, the different leadership structures in government, what role do they have in this, or if any, or is this, like, what do you see their role?
You mean with regard to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and Office of Hawaiian Affairs? Well, first of all, both of them have federally statutorily authorized roles already. It's not going to diminish So the Department of Interior and other federal officials have an obligation. I think what makes this process amazing, which still needs to be kept in check, is that anybody should be able to. And you need to make sure of that, which is why I have expressed concerns that it would be limited to Native Hawaiian organizations. First of all, and that would be besides OHA and DHL. If you look at the list, because there's been so much distrust, the list is not exhaustive, either on the Hawaiian Homelands front or the Native Hawaiian organizations front. So I think the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations needs to step up their game, get a better understanding of the universe, and if they don't voluntarily give their names, go on outreach and say, would you like to outreach, right? So I think it's important that the process is right. So I have long stated that the Department of Interior needs to do a better job, right? They need to build more capacity. And I've also been critical of the inception of the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations, because I felt that the official who is based in DC was not as qualified as he could have been to interface with our community. And if you look at the language crafted and you look at the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations website, I'm still convinced that he thinks that we're American Indians. And that needs to change. So fundamentally, again, I applaud the efforts by the secretary. I have concerns over the capacity of those who are going to be behind this policy, because if they don't know who we are, then how are they going to be able to help us? Troubling to me would be on page 4 of the proposed manual language, 513 DM1, INJ. It has here under definitions a Native Hawaiian Community Governance Officer. And it says it would be a person who they would designate. And if there is no active officer, the tribal governance officer, as designated under another rule, which they don't even cite, will serve as the NHCGO. That means it probably is in the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So there's also a Native Hawaiian Community Liaison Officer in J that says similar language. This needs to, we need to question this. And I, again, say, if we were to modify the language, who are these people going to be? Okay? Because if we don't have the right people there, then they're going to be telling the wrong story to the Department of Interior and to the rest of the federal agency. And again, we don't need this consultation process to hold the Department of Interior accountable. And that's something that we should be doing, as well as the Hawaii Congressional Delegation. Now, fortunately for us, we also, apart from the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations, we have a senior advisor for Native Hawaiian Affairs, which is a political appointed position, which we fought for under President Obama. President Trump didn't designate one, but President Obama has designated Summer Silva. And I'm delighted for her to be there, but let me tell you something, that is temporary. So what I worry about is the capacity of the Department of Interior in the long run. And just to piggyback on what Halealoha said, so we can't have a one-way conversation. But let me just, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back a little bit on why I still don't want to give up completely. We were never consulted in the overthrow, 1893. We were never consulted in the 1898 annexation. In fact, Hawaii was unilaterally annexed, right, without consultation of 2/3 of the Senate, which would normally have been required. It was just 50% of the U.S. Congress. Nor were we consulted in 1959. They're going to say, well, the majority of people voted for the State Admissions Act, but that option was only for statehood or not for statehood, as opposed to the internationally recognized mechanisms and options for self-determination, which would have been free association, a form within the administering authority, or full independence. And
not only that, but voting requirements included you had to disavow the previous government. So
yeah, but
those who did participated.
Yeah, but the United States in 1898 did that with the Newlands Resolution when they abrogated all of our treaties unilaterally, right? So I guess I just I applaud them for doing it. I don't know if they realize what's going to happen. I don't believe, including myself, we would. I don't believe we are going to be limited to the issues that they think are going to come before them. This is, again, beyond the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. It's beyond all of the federal programs to currently exist. And it's, I think it's welcome because they're going to know. We are barely surviving here. We have the highest rate of housing, both for rentals as well as owning condos or single-family homes in the nation. And so I hope that they're ready. They're ready for the ride.
Interesting. I just want to clarify, as I think it's a learning moment. So you've mentioned the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations. That is a department in the Department of Interior, right? That was, because I don't think most people know that there's an Office of Native Hawaiian Relations in the Department of Interior.
That's correct. So first off, there are two provisions that give authority for it. One is the Hawaiian Homelands Recovery Act that was actually taking off on the Federal State Task Force in 1993 on the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which recommended that the Department of Interior officially designate a high-level official. And so under that act, we chose the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget, which is the most powerful Assistant Secretary of all of the six. And then the Hawaii delegation also inserted in an appropriations bill to establish an Office of Native Hawaiian Relations. I do question whether that is the appropriate place. It's been over 20 years, and I know there's thoughts on where it could be. At a minimum, regardless of where it is, I do believe that it warrants, given where we are in our relationship, a full-time Deputy Assistant Secretary for Native Hawaiian Affairs, either to the Assistant Secretary for Policy Management and Budget or the Assistant Secretary for Insular and International Affairs. I know that was something, the move of the office was contemplated under the Trump administration, and that was not followed through. And I'm hoping that through this consultation process, we can help Secretary Holland in determining that. But at a minimum, unless we have a Deputy Assistant Secretary, right, we're relegated to the back burner, in other words. So the Secretary will likely do the consultation, but what I'm worried about is who's going to be on the ground on helping to administer the overall relationship.
Yeah.
And regrettably, the directors do not have the same access to leadership up the chain of command than a Deputy Assistant Secretary or Assistant Secretary.
Got it. So, Hale, I want to ask you just a follow-up question, and you can take this wherever you want. But the Department of Interior is a cabinet position. Some of the issues that impact Native Hawaiian community might be in other departments, or like maybe the Department of State as to or military affairs or use of military land. So can you tell us, like, this consultation process, how could it stem into some of the impacts or things that are important to Native Hawaiian community that might not be in the Interior's purview?
Good question. So in our experience, we engage in a lot of international work with other countries, foreign jurisdictions. And our ability to move and to be able to convince museums and this is for the purpose of getting museums in foreign countries to return our ancestors. And our ability to convince them is in part a function of the role of the U.S. State Department in leaning on these governments and these institutions to comply. And so federal consultation is already occurring. We've been doing it with the U.S. State Department for years, asking them for support. And for those who say, why are you, consulting with or working with the federal government? They're the enemy. And my answer is, they're a tool that's necessary for us to bring our ancestors home. So my responsibility is to get them home and reburied. And if the occupier is going to give us that much in terms of help, I'll take it. And we've established very strong relationships with the U.S. State Department in all the countries, especially in Europe, to the point where they will then inform airport security, both in Europe and the U.S., because we're not just bringing them home. We're bringing them home at a high level, which means we don't want them X-rayed when we hand carry them. We don't want them exposed. They don't get X-rayed in Europe. They don't get X-rayed when you come home. They don't get exposed. But that is because of the consultation process that occurs so that we can educate them on why it is important, not just that we bring our ancestors home, but that we bring them home at a high level. Right. So that's another example of how consultation with a federal department can have real life benefits for us. So that's one example where we actually use it. But I want to just go over some of the comments to the rules, because I read this. I read the outline, and so again, the number one requirement that I would urge our people to adopt is that the consultation process be meaningful. I think we can all agree that, this is kind of like a bad marriage. It doesn't only matter that they hear you. You want her to listen. So how much louder can we say ole TMT? I mean, seriously. So section 513 DM1, section 1.4 under definitions. Subsection G, entitled Native Hawaiian Community. Change the word indigenous to aboriginal. Indigenous has political ramifications. And we need to remove that word. Thank you, Kiaʻāina and Kauisai, for enlightening me. Subsection H, entitled Native Hawaiian Organization. I don't know if people caught this. This is the most obvious one. Under the federal definition of Native Hawaiian Organization, it does not require the organization to actually have Hawaiians. Go read the definition again. How do I know that? In the Mokapu case, there was an organization comprised completely of non-Hawaiians. But they provide services, they declare their, they meet those definitions, those elements of the definition. So I'm strongly recommending that there be an additional recommendation that the majority of members be of Hawaiian ancestry. And then in section 1.5 policy, subsection C, entitled Government to Sovereign Relationship and Reconciliation. Read that section, because it's kind of the best part, because it lays out all the things the federal government wants to do by improving this relationship and in effect empowering Hawaiian sovereignty. So sounds really nice, right? So it should include a mandatory, in fact, in all federal laws, should have this mandatory disclaimer in all caps. And it says, until such time as the federal government changes its mind. Which is to say to our people, when these windows of opportunity open up, take them. Because, if the guy in the orange hair gets reelected next time, all of this is going to disappear as quickly as it appeared. That's how this works. So, while on the one hand, yes, we're there's some kind of, happiness or agreement that the feds are trying to elevate this relationship. At the same time, recognize, somebody give you a rotten egg. I don't care how many ways you color or make them look pretty. It's still a rotten egg. So, make informed decisions, make responsible decisions. And I know this is tough reading, but read through what it says and what they're trying to do. And if you're responsible for something in your community that impacts our natural resources, I would say please engage. Cool. Engage the knowledge that you bring, because it will help elevate your responsibility.
Thank you. I want to give you guys a chance for closing thoughts. Any last things? Again, this is an opportunity for us to share with the greater audience things they need to know about this consultation. What are the takeaways? It's complex for the average person. So what are your closing thoughts, since anything you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I think the closing, I want to close my remarks by talking about probably the greatest threat that faces our community at the federal level, which probably gives reason to why this should be considered to be more important for us. And that is, given the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court, which will likely last for the next 20 years, it is likely that we will get a 14th Amendment or Equal Protection Clause challenge against Native Hawaiians in the federal court system within the next 10 years. And by that I mean the U.S. Supreme Court has already ruled against Native Hawaiians in Rice versus Kiaʻāina under the 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment relates to the constitutionality of the state and federal government to enact laws specifically for Native Hawaiians. I'm worried that should a federal court case go through the system under the current makeup, it will be struck down. And so the reason dialogues like this are important is so that the policymakers and Solicitor's Office and Secretary of Interior understands the threat. The threats, again, are not just what's happening on the ground here. It's going to happen in our court system. And people in Rice versus Kiaʻāina thought, nothing's going to happen. And yet the election mechanism was struck down. And it's very, very difficult for Native Hawaiians who have strong background in Native Hawaiian issues to be elected because a great majority of people voting in OHA are non-Hawaiian. So I guess the threat is real. And I just am hoping that people know whatever we can do to increase our dialogue, I think with the Secretary of Interior at this point in history and this point in time is very much appreciated. And I look forward, again, thank you for having us, but I look forward to being a resource for the community in whatever way I can.
All right, awesome. So when you refer to the admissions policy, you're talking about like commitment schools.
Well, that would be a second. The first attack will be on the constitutionality of OHA and the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. I personally believe that the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act can withstand strict scrutiny standards for legal purposes. I'm not confident that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs would. So having said that, it is correct that the admissions policy for the Kamehameha schools could be a separate lawsuit. And as many of you know, in the last case that was brought before the U.S. Supreme Court, there was a settlement. And I can assure you, with all of the attacks happening on women's rights, gun safety, tribal rights, the current course of the nation is on the wrong track. And so we have to do everything we can to help our communities in whatever way we can, regardless of self-determination, because there's so much at stake.
Thank you, Esther. Thanks for being here. Hale, closing thoughts.
I wanted to end with my thoughts on self-determination and the Department of Interior's role in it. So, self-determination should mean just that. We Hawaiians should not be asking the illegal occupier what they will and will not grant us. That is the antithesis of self-determination. The proper term for that relationship is colonialism. To be self-determining means to live up to our cultural responsibilities and not suffer from the disease of entitlement, irrespective of the views of a third party. This is more about our duty, which in turn earns us privilege, but only when we are behaving responsibly. So situations like this, to me, raises the reminder that in our daily lives, regardless of what your views are in the United States, the Department of Interior, or OHA, that you behave responsibly to each other. I mean, let's agree to disagree, but behave responsibly for what we have and what we need to do as Hawaiians. As long as we adopt a simple approach as that, we'll be far better off as a people than if we lose track and get caught up in this disease that my sister calls entitlement. Let's stop thinking like that. That's the colonized American mind thinking. The Hawaiian mind says, how do I be responsible to my akua, to my ohana, and to the aina? So that's what I would say, aloha aina o i'iwa.
Wow. Thank you. Well, there you have it. Two of our experts that have been toggling in the federal government, advocating for our lahui, sharing with you what's about to occur with this consultation. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for
Mahalo for
sharing.
having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Okay, till the next What's the Scoops. Ahui ho.